Hey, welcome to another episode of Expedition Marriage. I am Chris with my lovely wife, Jamie. And if you are sitting on YouTube, because we're on YouTube now, you will see that I went out to the beach.
Yes, this is not an episode of Veggie Tales with Bob the Tomato.
Nice. I am sitting.
Yeah.
This is standing. This is sitting. I'm sitting. Okay.
That is a really good impression, honey.
Thanks. It's sad that I work on these things. Okay. Because I am that hero. Okay. Anyway, so we are Chris and Jamie. We're not really the Veggie Tales, and I hope they don't sue us for licensing.
I think we're safe, baby. I think we're safe.
But we want to welcome you to our episode and in our YouTube channel. And if you are listening to us on either way, please subscribe, please hit a follow, and give us a review or a comment, because we love to hear from those. And my lovely bride has
I do. Actually, I want to give out a shout out because this episode is brought to you by HD Builders.
Shout out!
They are the best custom home builders in all of York County, South Carolina. And we can say that because they are building our home, and it should be ready like any day now. Any day now. We already said
close.
Thanksgiving is either going to be at our house or theirs. So anyway, we do want to give them a shout out because your wife left a beautiful review for us. So that's what it gets you. There's perks to leaving reviews, people. So what Julia says is, I love this podcast so much. They have wonderful tips and reminders to keep you aware and encouraged in your marriage journey. And I love that, because that's what we strive to do. So shout out to Julia for holding it down for HD Builders.
HD Builders! So there's your shout outs. And we really do appreciate those, and we love getting those. So please hit us up. And of course, you can always go over to our Instagram as well. We are expedition_marriage. And so we're in all these different places. It's not hard to find us.
It's maddening.
It's maddening. It is maddening. But today we wanted to actually, speaking of our Instagram transition, speaking of our Instagram, we do have people reach out, and we've actually had gotten some questions that people wanted us to address on the podcast.
Yeah, and this was one we got from multiple listeners. So we want to address that. And so today what we're talking about is how to deal with a defensive spouse.
Yeah, what are you talking about? I'm not defensive. Why do you have to bring this stuff up? I
know. And that's it. To start that off, it's like you're doing. We want to give some examples so you know what defensiveness is. And so that it can look very simple. It can be something, and look, I'm just going to go right out there and go for it now. I have always struggled with being a defensive spouse. And as we unfold this episode, it's going to make sense. And I've learned to make sense of it. So because I know what's happening, we can fix it.
Sure.
But it's me. I'm the defensive spouse. I don't think you've ever been that way.
Oh, I'm a huge minimizer.
Yes, that is true. You're not defensive. You're just minimizing things.
Minimizer, right. Because if I can convince you it's not as big of a deal as you're portraying it to be, then if you see it different, then your feelings about it will be smaller, and it will let me breathe a little easier.
Yeah, that's what you're telling yourself is going to happen anyway.
Sure, yeah, that's the magic wand, the version of it.
No, but what it is, it can be I'm thinking with us, and here's an example of just him asking me where something is. Or did this get done? Or did you finish doing that? I would instantly snap. No, I didn't have time to do that. And, you just asked me 5 minutes ago or whatever it is. But it was an innocent question that is met with defensive,ness. And that's very confusing to a spouse.
Sometimes it's, what did you say, honey?
Right. That is true. That is true. And we're going to talk about why that happens. Or you could also you're trying to start a conversation with a spouse, and it instantly gets derailed.
Yeah.
They're not going to talk about it, or they're blaming you for things and not taking responsibility for anything, even when there's nothing to take responsibility for.
Yeah, that wasn't even on the table.
Right.
That wasn't even what was brought up.
Right, so it's very confusing.
Oh, absolutely. And I was just thinking, we're being the people pleaser and saying yes and struggling with not letting my yes be yes, my no be no. There was a lot of times I would say yes because that makes you happy.
Yes.
Could you do this? Yes.
Yeah.
Will you do this today? Yes. hey, did you get this done today? Well, you know how busy I am. You know that I've got all these things to do, and I can't get to everything. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly what would happen. And that's something, if you're listening to this because you believe you have a defensive spouse, there's a good chance that you're falling on that people pleasing kind of side of things too, because that's what a defensive spouse begins to create in somebody is a walking on eggshells mentality.
Yeah.
They're always angry. A defensive spouse usually will be angry a lot. They will be negative. They will be blame casting.
I didn't do that.
Right.
Yeah,
And it can, over time, start to eat away at your spouse, and where you feel like, I'm just not going to say anything, or I'm just going to do all the stuff myself because it's too difficult and I don't want to fight about this.
Right.
And that's not okay. You should not settle for that. We're not like that anymore. I will be honest and tell you, I will default there. But we know what to do with it. And so if you're living in a situation where there is defensiveness, there really is a fix to it.
Yeah.
Now, I had to be willing, but there are things each of us can take responsibility with to fix this problem.
Our own personal responsibility.
That's
now,
right.
We can help each other as far as bringing it up and pointing it out, and we'll talk more about that. But we have our own personal responsibility that we need to step into.
Yeah, that's always the downer, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. That personal responsibility stuff. Ugh. Why can't you just change?
I know. I know. Though, I think in our marriage, that may have helped 80% of the problems if I just changed. But I did.
I only do this because you do this stuff.
I know. That's like a common thing. We hear that so many times in the counseling office. If you would just stop doing this, then I would do that. Those are lines that a defensive spouse will say.
It didn't happen that way. Because look, if I can just help you understand the order of how it happened, then it excuses my behavior.
Right. So I'm going to give you a list of justifications as to why I've earned the right to be defensive.
Right.
And here's the reality. To cut this short, let's get right to it. Defensiveness is self-protective.
Yep.
It is nothing more than a self-protective move, right?
Yeah, it absolutely. And we've said this before. Communication's a lot about what's heard, not what's said. So there's somebody's picking up the wrong message. They're hearing the wrong things. Being a pleaser, we've talked about that in prior episodes, where I would hear somehow it's my fault, that I'm the one to blame, that you're mad at me, and so then I'm stepping into that situation as being self-protective.
Right.
Well, I didn't do that. That's not how that happened. Or there's other things that well, I only did that because of this, or whatever it is. I'm so busy, and this is why. So there's different reasons why people will self-protect. We're throwing out some of those, but that's what we're doing. But the problem is, with defensiveness, well, there's a lot of problems. Well, one of the main problems is it's you versus me. And when it's you versus me, there can't be a we.
Right. That's right. And you need a we in marriage, because that's what marriage is. It's two becoming one. It's us. Yeah. It's no longer running my own agenda. It's no longer running his agenda. It's about us. And you need both partners to take responsibility and to take ownership and to be willing to grow. But, as somebody who is more defensive, I can tell you my own reasons, and I think they're common. And we see this a lot. But a lot of defensiveness, it's there because we receive things like you're saying, we're not hearing what's being said. It's going through this filter, and we receive almost everything as criticism.
Yeah.
And a lot of that happens, I think majority of that happens in our upbringing. I grew up in a very highly critical home with a lot of negative messages and I was the family scapegoat. And so the blame was always put on me, and Jamie just needed to be quiet. Jamie needs to do this. She's doing that again. And all this stuff about how horrible Jamie was. Yeah. And so now thank you, baby. Thank you. But that kind of became my filter, is anything you say with a hint of negativity to it, or even if it's just, did you get the laundry done? Where you're just really wanting to know where your shirt is. What I hear is you don't do anything right. Why can't you do this simple task? And so I put my own negative filtered spin on it, where it's not at all what you're saying. You just want to know where your shirt is. But what I'm hearing is I'm a horrible wife who didn't get the laundry done or who you thought wasn't capable of doing it.
Sure.
And it all of a sudden I'm defending something because I think a negative thing is coming at me.
Yeah, that's rough. And it's part of our defensive weapons, right? You know, and look, guys, we're just being defensive, right? I'm just protecting myself. I'm getting attacked. But the problem with our defensive weapons is they're offensive to the other person. So this is what starts these cycles. Like, okay, I bring this up. They get defensive. Well, that triggers in me. And now you're all going back and forth about things that you don't even know why you're going back and forth. Because Jamie's not saying, hey, it feels like you're blaming me. And so that's why I'm saying this defensive thing that you're right. So there's no idea of what's going on.
Right.
It feels like blame shifting. It feels like I'm being attacked, so I'll get defensive. You're being attacked. You're getting defensive, and it just erodes the relationship. And when we have a breakdown of relationship, bad things tend to happen.
That's right. And I don't even know. I do now, and hopefully after this episode, you will as well. But I didn't even know to question whether or not what he was saying was negative because I automatically believed it.
Yeah.
Because that's the history I have. And so I automatically assumed, of course he's blaming me. And it's like I lived my life very self-protective, ready because I had lived a lifetime where I needed to defend myself, where I needed to protect myself. But in marriage, you shouldn't have to do that. And there's lots of anxiety and overwhelm that can happen as well. And if you're living a life where you are anxious or dealing with overwhelm or dealing with stress, those can be big triggers and big indicators of why your spouse might be defensive.
Or like myself, everybody's mad at me. Or you're saying something, it's because you're mad at me. Or you look like you're frustrated at this situation. You're mad at me.
Right.
And so now I'm defensive because the anxiety kicks in and there's this break of relationship that I'm not clarifying. I don't know what's really going on. I'm making a lot of assumptions about what's going on.
Yeah, and that's the thing. In marriage, those are the times when we get married, that's when we need to stop protecting ourselves and it becomes about protecting one another.
Yeah, the relationship.
It becomes about, protecting us, protecting the relationship. And that requires vulnerability. And if somebody has grown up in a way where they have had a filter shaped for them by being treated inappropriately, by maybe a past relationship, maybe they experienced something in middle school that was really hurtful, or by a dysfunctional home, it's hard to set that stuff down. Because when you start to heal, that's the thing people don't really understand about healing, is it sounds so great to find healing, but they don't really take into account the massive amount of vulnerability healing requires.
Yeah.
Because if I set down my protective shield, I'm vulnerable to being hurt even worse. And that's why you do find a lot of people who put stakes in the ground, and I don't want to call it victimhood. Sometimes it is, but they put that stake of pride in the ground that it's easier just to stick in my defensiveness, to stay in my woundedness, because I am not going to set myself up to be hurt again by you.
Sure.
Or by whoever.
Well, and healing is scary because, so we go through this process, we start to get healing, and then something bad happens again. Wow, what a fall.
That's right. That's right. The fall is farther, so we'd rather not. But you're missing out on so much goodness. And that's the thing. I mean, there's the caveat in it all. It's like the greater the love, the deeper the grief. But do you want to give up that great love just to protect yourself of potential grief?
Yeah.
And that's not what marriage is about. So much of marriage is about helping. My job as your wife is to help you become more like Christ.
Yes.
And that's your job as my husband. And you have to be willing to grow and to acknowledge the defensiveness. And, if you've got a spouse who is defensive and they may not be the one listening to this episode. In fact, maybe you can't get them to listen to it. We want to talk to you now because there are things you can't change your spouse. Don't ever think you can change your spouse. No. Don't ever have those expectations. You'll be disappointed every time. but you can do things to help your spouse. You can set them up for success, but they have to choose to want to go down that path. And so you are a resource to them. So what you can do is first, change your perspective and see this for what it is. When a spouse is defensive, it feels like a threat to you. And like Chris was saying, you go back and forth and all of a sudden you're on this cycle, going round and round. You've got to stop that. Yeah. You've got to know this isn't about me. This isn't about me. This is about a filter they have. This is about a lack of understanding they may have. And add some patience in there. See it for what it is.
Grace.
This is most likely defensiveness comes out of woundedness. And when there's a wound, you don't want to, protect yourself or attack the defensiveness. You want to help bring healing to the woundedness.
Right. Well, that's a great point, because I was thinking if someone's getting defensive, then if you see it, okay, that means they feel like they're being attacked. It's not like but it feels like an attack.
Yes.
But if they're being defensive, then they're feeling like they're being attacked. If you're not meaning to attack them, if that's not your goal, if you're not setting out to attack them, then that's a good time for you to pump the brakes, slow things down, and realize, hey, if they feel attacked, then there probably is a woundedness that needs to be addressed. So, one of the things that we actually have a 4-part episode as far as working through conflict, and it's episodes 18, 19, 20, and 21, I think. But there's the O in love, and that's observe the effects.
Yeah, it's how to love your way through conflict.
Yes. And so,
making that O make sense.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, for in the LOVE. The O is to observe the effects. If someone's reacting in a way that you didn't expect them to react, then maybe the message got lost.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something going on. So that's a good time to pause and to back up and to try to find what it is that they're hearing or what they're engaging in. You can't help them hear differently, but you can certainly stop things and try to figure out what's going on. And certainly, like you were saying before, you don't want to get caught up in your own emotional reactivity and then just continue the circle and never get to resolution.
And nor do you want to avoid it because of how they're responding. And so this is an area where clarification is needed on both parts, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And if you're the defensive one, if you're someone who struggles with defensiveness and you're listening to this, then use clarifying questions. Ask, okay, are you saying that I'm the one to blame? Are you saying that I'm the one who's at fault? Are you saying, right, are you mad at me? Those kind of questions. And that way give your spouse the opportunity to let you know, hey, no, that's not what's going on. Here's what's going, what I'm trying to do. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Look, if they say, yes, I'm mad at you and I'm saying it's your fault and I'm blaming you, well, then now let's actually have a discussion.
At least you're dealing with truth.
Yeah, about what's really going on instead of all these assumptions and these misunderstandings. Who wants to have an 2-hour argument over some misunderstanding that could have been resolved in 10 seconds?
Right. And that's going to be the clue is when that defensiveness comes up, when you're the defensive spouse, when you feel that anxiety, when you feel that need to defend, that's no longer time to defend as much as it's time to ask a question.
Yeah.
What are you meaning by what you said? And here's what I was hearing. And even asking yourself, if you can't even have that conversation then and it goes awry, sit back later and go, why did I do that? What did I hear them say? And then circle back around and say, when you said this, here's what I heard. Yeah. And provide opportunity. And if you're the spouse on the other side of that, enter in when you're observing that negative effect happening, that big reaction, enter in with a clarifying question. What did you hear me say? What is it you're upset about there? And here's some questions you can ask as a spouse on the other side that will help support them and help bring healing instead of criticism is, what do you need from me right now?
Yeah, that's a good one.
What is it you need from me right now, aside from the clarifying a question? And what is it I'm not getting that you want me to get? What is it I'm not hearing that you want me to really, really hear? Because, it's okay if you all disagree.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree on everything.
And I was even thinking, once Jamie and I had learned, hey, look, that blame was something in her woundedness. When I had seen her become some emotionally reactive in certain situations, I was able to take a step back and go, hey, I'm not blaming you. If you're thinking I'm blaming you, I'm not. That's
right.
So I hope that's not the situation. And then we were able to move forward into figuring out, okay, what is going on?
Yeah, and it's not this magical cure. You don't do this one time.
Yeah.
And then there it goes. I mean, it requires vulnerability to heal from this. But defensiveness, really, it's woundedness.
Yeah.
Is what it is, And so you want to get to the root of that. You want to start treating it like that, because that's really what it is. And so you want to get to, when we say this all the time, become a PhD of your spouse's woundedness.
Yeah.
Because when you understand that, you begin to see everything so differently in your marriage. So your spouse isn't against you. They're not trying to fight you. Defensiveness is almost like a trigger.
Yeah.
People defend themselves only when they feel threatened.
Right.
And it doesn't mean there's an actual threat there. I will run as far as I can and screaming if there is a lizard near me. A lizard is not a threat. My brain don't know that.
No.
I will take off, and I can barely walk, much less run, but I will freak out at the sight of a lizard. I don't even like saying it right now. But a lizard is not a threat. It kind of works the same way. It doesn't mean there's a threat present, but it means your spouse is feeling one. And so if you're dealing with this, work on some of these things. But if you get gridlocked, and by gridlocked, we mean you're stuck. Nothing's working for it. That's when you get some help. And so be sure to do that. This is a fixable problem.
Absolutely.
And so address it as if it can be be fixed, and get some help that you need for it. And, if you like this episode, would you screenshot it and share it?
Yeah.
Let your friends know about it. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, leave a comment. We'd love to know your thoughts, because we really are here to help you in your marriage, because we truly want you to
enjoy the journey.